What's up, everyone, and thanks for tuning in. I'm joined by Jonny Rankin to cover the NFL Week 8 main slate on Draftkings. Johnny, how's it going, and are you ready to jump in?
I am. Let's do it.
Perfect. All right, we're going to start with the quarterbacks up here. Um, this is like an aggregated projection set. It's got a few different projections averaged out here. It's very early in the week. We should mention we're recording this Wednesday night, so things are bound to change a lot. So take everything we're going to say with a grain of salt. But I did want to start with kind of the main guys that I think will get the most conversation this week. Jalen Hurts, I think, is up there. I think Tua against Detroit is really going to be popular. And then I think the talk of the week is going to be Sam Ellinger. Ellinger, not even sure if I'm saying that correct, but the new guy that's taking over for Matt Ryan and the Colts. Let's start with him, Johnny. Do you have a strong opinion on him? I mean, he's the minimum price for a quarterback on DraftKings, so I assume that he's going to get some ownership and probably be a popular cash game play.
Yeah, so all I know about him is he went to Texas.
Uh huh.
Um, and as being from Arkansas, I don't like Texas. So I never had much reason to pay attention to him. From what I understand, he's a little bit more of a runner. Not that that's a high bar to clear to be more of a runner than Matt Ryan.
Yeah.
But at the flat minimum against the bad Washington defense, he's going to look very appealing, especially in cash games, and especially with all of the premium running backs to pay for this week.
Yeah, for sure. I think he is going to be popular, and like you mentioned, he does have some rushing ability. As far as that gives him a pretty safe floor. As far as ceiling, I'm not really sure how he's going to fare out, but we're not too concerned about that in cash games. So I'm just in the middle about cash games versus tournaments this week, but I do think he's a solid play in cash games. How about the other two guys I mentioned up top, Johnny? Jalen Hurts, Tua, and then I also think maybe you could throw Kyler and Geno Smith, kind of just a tier below those two that I mentioned. But how about those four guys? Does anyone stand out above the rest for you?
It is actually Kyler right now.
Okay.
I liked how they looked against the Saints last Thursday with the return of Hopkins. He's been not what you wanted. He's not winning any tournaments, but he hasn't dudded either.
Mm-hmm.
I think he just needs maybe a few more touchdowns, and I think he can get that with Hopkins, especially in the dome versus Minnesota. Only concern is that stack would be pretty expensive, especially compared to some of the other quarterbacks.
Yeah.
But in tournaments, he stands out just because from what I'm seeing, he's about half the ownership of Hurts and about a third of that of Tua.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think out of those guys, if you're gonna pay up here or kind of get close to paying up, I think Tua at 6,200 is just like criminally underpriced. I think him and Ellinger will probably be the two most popular cash game quarterbacks. And yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you that Kyler Murray might be the best tournament play of the bunch, and just for ownership. And like I mentioned, we're recording Wednesday night, so this is subject to change, but we're working with the information we got right here. I did want to mention a couple other kind of like secondary tournament plays that I think are interesting, Johnny, and get your opinion on these guys. I wrote down Kirk Cousins, my boy Danny Dimes, and then Jared Goff, and to a lesser degree Dak Prescott. But yeah, any opinion on those four guys? Any strong opinion?
Yeah, I was hoping you'd bring up a couple of those guys.
Uh
So
huh.
I don't actually have Dak in my quarterback player pool right
Yeah.
now. Didn't love how he looked last week. Obviously, returning from injury. Um, so, give him a little bit of pass for that. But that game's such a low total. Chicago, they did look great on Monday, but I don't necessarily trust that. And I have a hard time seeing him getting there with Pollard and Zeke, whether or not he plays,
Mm-hmm.
um, sort of to run all over Chicago. But the other three you mentioned, I do like a lot. Kirk, just that same game environment with Kyler, and he's right at the same price as Tua. Tua definitely
Mm-hmm.
looks better from a projection standpoint, and I think he's more likely to succeed. But Kirk's probably going to go under-owned.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Jones, I'm concerned that maybe we missed out, and last week was the week, when he put up 30. And it's hard to stack him because who's he going to throw to? And I just don't have a good feel on the Giants wide receivers. Geno, looks okay. I'm more interested in Kenneth Walker,
Hmm.
especially their passing game, losing DK Metcalf. But I do like golf a lot, right? So two is going to be popular. That game is going to be popular for good reason. Stacking against Detroit has worked,
Hmm.
as we've seen, early in the season. Um, and I don't see a reason why golf couldn't have a similar ceiling to Tua. We've seen him do it before when they played, I believe, Seattle. Yeah, Seattle
Yeah.
in week four. So um, he'll be a lot lower owned than Tua. Probably looks worse. Probably if you ran this Sunday 100 times, he'd probably score lower than him most of those times. But I think when he does outscore him, he does it in a big way and helps you take down tournaments.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and the only thing I'd say that I pretty much agree with everything you said, Johnny. The one thing I'll say about Daniel Jones is I don't know that you necessarily need to stack him with anyone. Just we've seen now 3 games where he has double digit rushing attempts, and it's been working. And last week he went over 100 yards, so I would still probably try to find someone to stack him with. I know Wan'Dale Robinson has been kind of his go-to target, just recently since he's come back. But yeah, I think with his rushing upside, you can almost treat. And I know this sounds crazy, but he's like a poor man's Lamar, where it's
Mhm.
you don't necessarily have to stack him in my opinion. But I do totally agree. Like it feels a little bit chasey coming off a 32-point DraftKings game. So for sure, don't want to fall into that trap. But yeah, I think those are kind of the top 8 or 9 guys that we mentioned. Is there anyone that I didn't mention, Johnny, that you wanna talk about?
Not really. Those were mostly the guys I'm focused on. We didn't really touch on Hurts, but I think it's just kind of a no-brainer that he looks
Right.
good. We saw what his archetype and Josh Allen did to Pittsburgh 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not expecting 38 DraftKings points, but it's certainly not out of the question. And as far as everyone else, there's not a lot of great options this week. I'm not interested in Stafford against San Francisco, other than rostering the 49ers to get a pick six. Um, Andy Dalton, I guess. You know, I'd rather
Yeah,
play golf,
those guys are like
and that's about it.
for sure. I totally agree. I think those guys are like fringe plays at best. The one thing I will mention, Jalen Hurts. It will be interesting to see how his ownership comes out later in the week because I could see him, coming in at probably lower ownership than he deserves just from a pricing standpoint. I mean, you can pay less than half and get Sam Ellinger, you know what I mean, or drop down 2,100 and get Tua, guys that are going to project better from like a points, divided by salary perspective. So I do want to keep an eye on Jalen Hurts because if he's coming in lower owned, I think he is like the one guy on the slate that has 40-point upside. Maybe you could make the case for Kyler, but yeah. So let's move on to running back here. I had a couple guys listed that I thought, above 7K that it's really hard to poke holes in. Like I just feel really good about all these guys, and that's Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, and Alvin Kamara. I still don't think that they priced up Josh Jacobs enough for the role that he's getting. Johnny, those 4 guys, Henry, Barkley, Jacobs, and Kamara, is there any holes you can poke in those guys, or do you feel pretty strongly about them as well?
Taysom Hill is the only hole in Alvin Kamara,
Fair enough.
but that's sort of a personal grudge.
Yeah.
Um, 9, 9, and 6 targets in the past 3 games. People saying that without Breeze, he doesn't catch passes, need to look at that. He just has not scored a touchdown this year.
Hmm.
That's pretty much it with Kamara. He looks good, and I think if you play him, you probably don't play Jacobs. I don't necessarily exclude myself from playing 2 running backs from the same game, but I don't really prefer to. Um, Saquon and Derrick Henry look great. Derrick Henry versus AFC South is a good bet, and Seattle's run defense is terrible.
Hmm.
Jacobs has been smashing. I can't decide how I feel about him. Obviously, he's in a great role. He's getting 20 plus, 25 plus touches a game. I just see the touchdown numbers from the past 3 weeks, and
Hmm.
I'm concerned about what happens if those turn into Derek Carr touchdown passes. Um, I'll be playing plenty of them. I can't decide how I feel yet,
Yeah.
I guess.
No, for sure. And again, like we're so early in the week, so it's not like we got to make decisions right now. But yeah, like you mentioned, the volume has just been great, which is the main reason why he's going to project well. It's not the greatest matchup. It's not one that can't be beat either. So it's kind of like a middling one. Johnny's right. 3 touchdowns last week, and he's had a touchdown in each of the last 4 games, at least one touchdown. So really good numbers. And then, like Johnny mentioned as well, you go over to Alvin Kamara, who hasn't scored at all. It's like if you reverse those two, then we're probably looking at a different story in how we view these guys. And touchdowns are very random. I'll bring up like not Austin Eckler, who I don't think had a touchdown for the
Mhm.
first like 4 weeks or 5 weeks of the season, and then just has positive regression hit him in the face, like a ton of bricks. He's had, I don't know. I don't think he's on the main slate here. I think they're on a bye, so I don't have the number in front of me. But several touchdowns over the last few games, so it's only a matter of time before Kamara gets in the end zone. That Taysom Hill game where I think he had 3 or 4 touchdowns, whatever it was just ridiculous. But yeah,
Uh,
as
and
far
Kamara had 27 Draftkings points that
yeah,
game too.
uh
Like
huh,
he had a great game.
without a touchdown.
It, come on. I mean, Taysom already took away the record from him last year without letting him get 7 rushing touchdowns in the games.
Yeah.
You got to do it again, but
Yeah,
oh
and,
well.
and I kind of you touched on it a little bit. I don't think that I would play these guys together. I think you're just putting too much salary into one position from one game. If there were 2 wide receivers competing against each other, they could kind of speed up the pace a little bit. But as a from a running back perspective, you really hope Jacobs is kind of playing with the lead where he gets this huge rushing volume, and then that would also help Kamara. But if it's flipped, I'm not quite sure. I know Jacobs has been more involved in the past game, but obviously you'd prefer Jacobs to be playing from ahead. At least I would. So let's jump down. I had a couple secondary guys I wanted to ask you about, Johnny. I guess I could have thrown Kenneth Walker kind of in that tier above. But I just mentioned or didn't mention him because he wasn't 7K. But obviously coming off a really good game, volume was there. Not involved in the pass game at all, but they were playing with the lead, so it wasn't really necessary. Um, that is the one concern. If they are playing from behind, is he involved? Or how much is he involved? So that would be my one concern with him. But I think that he's in a great spot. He's fantastic. And then the other guys that I'll just mention, Johnny, before I let you go, is Ramondre Stevenson, Dameon Pierce, Raheem Mostert, and then I had Michael Carter kind of taking over the 1A role from Brees Hall. Those 5 guys, anyone standing out above the rest?
I kind of like Carter. I think everyone is immediately assumes Robinson's going to take over all those touches. Maybe he will, but I don't think it's going to be this week. He even came out of last week a little banged up, I
Mm-hmm.
believe. Um, Mostert looks good, although I'm concerned he's going to go a little bit overowned after being the optimal captain in the Sunday night
Yeah.
1,000 away chopper, however it was.
Yeah.
Um, Not sure that I'll get to a lot of Pierce, mostly because I would rather pay up for Henry.
Mm-hmm.
And if Henry's going off, Pierce is not getting touches. I have the same concerns with Kenneth Walker. Um, he's had a few games where he's had like 3 targets, which is okay. But Seattle running backs have historically not been used in the passing game, so I do think that's a good call out. Ramondre Stevenson projects really well for me. I don't think you mentioned him, but I can't decide if him getting all the touches on Monday was him taking over the backfield or Damian Harris suffering some lingering hamstring injuries. So it feels a little bit riskier than I think maybe the projections are showing right now.
For sure. And I mean, I saw it in the game. I didn't really know if I was reading too much into this, but Damian Harris dropped a pass, a pass he should have caught in the second quarter, and we really didn't see much of him after that. And we know that Bill Belichick is one to just kind of bench players when they make a mistake. So,
Yeah, that makes yeah.
maybe I was reading a little bit too much into that, but it's more so to just say that I think you're probably right. Stevenson is going to project well, but we could see Damian Harris a little bit more involved this week than we saw last week. Couple other guys I did just want to mention before we move on, Johnny, is I think we should always mention Jonathan Taylor. Game script did not go in his favor last week, but it was really encouraging to see him get 8 targets. Like, even in a game where they were playing from behind for the majority of the game, he's still involved. And if he's going to get 8 targets, that kind of makes him game script proof. Obviously, you want him playing from ahead where he has the potential to get like 30 carries, but I thought he was worth mentioning. And then Dalvin Cook. And then I'm not sure the status of DeAndre Swift. It's early in the week, but I do like the matchup. If he can get some full practices in, I would feel a lot better about it. But I did think that those guys were worth mentioning. Go ahead, Johnny, on any of those guys. And then if anyone I didn't mention that you want to talk about, go ahead on them too.
Yeah, the 8 targets for Taylor were encouraging. I just have no idea what that's going to look like with the different quarterback there.
True. True.
I'm concerned it's more a function of Matt Ryan being a statue and also having the wherewithal to check down, whereas Ellinger may take off. I don't really know.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And we saw the Deion
Yeah.
Jackson ceiling game from, when with Matt
hmm
Ryan as quarterback. So that's a great point. I should have mentioned that. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. Yeah. Cook looks good. Another similar to Camaro where it just hasn't been his week yet, and I
Yeah.
don't really know why. Let's see who else. Swift, I think he practiced in full today.
Okay.
Not positive. It seems like he's going to play, and so I do like him. Um, and someone who you did not mention, but that I'm maybe irrationally high on is Christian McCaffrey.
Okay.
Um, Mostly because he's going to be probably even lower owned than his projection. He's been that way most of the season, coming in single digits and just hasn't done it yet. He got what 10 touches last game after being traded 2 or 3 days beforehand.
Yeah.
I know that the narrative is that Shanahan uses a committee. I don't think that's true. I think it's more everyone is hurt, and so he uses a different running back every game. But whoever he uses, he gives a lot of touches to. Um, and so it's not like a crazy standard where I want 20% of him, right? But play 10% and you're well over the field. Um, and if you want to play into the narrative, San Francisco has run it down the Rams' throat, I think, in each of the past like 3 or 4 meetings. So
Yeah, no, I think that's a great call, and I'm realizing why I didn't mention him, Johnny. It's because one of these projection sets that I have averaged out must have him at 0, and when one of them has him at 0, it just gives him a 0. So he didn't even show up in my pool. But I just put him in. I just put him with with like a base projection of like 15 for now, just to get him in there so you guys can see him up top there. But yeah, thank you for bringing him up. All right, I think that's everyone. And I did look up. I just looked up the Lions practice report. DeAndre Swift did practice in full today. It's Wednesday. I'd feel really good. Obviously, I'd feel really good about him playing. And the fact that he's practicing this early, he's now had several weeks off. I actually feel really good about him. I'd be curious to see where his ownership is at the end of the week. So let's jump over to wide receiver. I had a couple guys up here at the top that I think stand out above the rest. Justin Jefferson at Arizona, and then Tyreek Hill at Detroit. I think maybe you could squeeze Devontae Adams in that tier too. And then also we should always mention Cooper Kupp, even though I think his matchup is pretty difficult. Do you like any of those top end guys, Johnny, or too expensive? What do you think?
well, Arizona shuts down number one wide receiver, so you can't play Justin Jefferson. Just
Right.
total fade.
Right.
No.
That shout out to our guy Balls Deep and yeah, funny
Yeah,
name
yeah.
in Discord. He is the one to bring up those nuggets, so kind of a little tease at him.
Yeah. That it is pretty funny. I've even heard it on the Mina Kimes podcast. They kind of poked fun at that narrative too. And for whatever reason, they have kind of shut down number one wide
Yeah.
receivers. But I don't expect, it doesn't change how I look at Jefferson,
Mhm.
which is I like him. 9,100 is a little bit rich, but I mean, he can put up 30 plus, 40 plus easily.
Right.
Tyreek Hill is going to be highly owned.
Mhm.
He's someone I generally don't like to play in cash, but might this week just because of the ownership and the fact that he is getting
Yeah.
13, 15 targets. Um, so it's hard not to like that.
I feel you,
Um,
Johnny. I feel like I used to have that too when he was on the Chiefs, like
mhm.
not wanting to play him in cash. I think his role is even better on this team, which is not something I really expected before the season. But you're right, he's got 28 targets over the last 2 weeks, and he's got 5 games with double-digit targets, and actually in all 5 of those he had 12 or more. His role is insane right now, so yeah, I think he has to be considered for cash games at least.
Yeah, and even in tournaments, he's a good
Yeah,
chalk, right?
I would
And
think
in
so.
a
Yeah,
way, yeah, and a way to get different, like is just play golf, and then bring Hill back on the
yeah.
other side. I think is something I'll be doing a lot of. Maybe too much of, but we'll see. Um, AJ Brown, I like him a lot. We haven't seen an absolute ceiling game, but I know it's there. Um, and then if Hopkins is going to get a 40-something% target share again, he just needs to find the end zone.
Yeah, no, for sure, and I think that those are probably, as far as spend ups, those are kind of the top end guys right there that we just mentioned. And I think I did touch on Cooper Cup, but obviously we should always mention him. And then let's see,
Yeah, I won't have much. I won't have Stafford, so I'll probably just naturally not get to a lot of them.
yeah,
But
for sure, I get
potential's
that.
there.
Let's see. We talked about Hopkins. I think that it kind of goes hand in hand with Dak. CD's going to project well. He's coming off, he had a bad game. He went for 70 yards, 4 receptions. He only had 6 targets. So I think based off, his production off of the 6 targets are good. I'm concerned that the game flow goes similar to how it went last week with Detroit. If the Cowboys can get pushed, I would feel a lot better about CD. But when they're going to play from ahead, they're very comfortable playing slow, running the clock. So yeah, it's a little bit tough to get on CD, even though I think he is going to project well. And then the other 2 guys, and they're in the same game: Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle, and then I'll throw in DK Metcalf if he plays. I haven't seen the practice report yet, and then Tyler Lockett, who has also been dealing with some injuries himself. How about that mid tier, Johnny? Kind of the 65 to 7K range. Lamb, Amon-Ra, Jalen Waddle, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. Do you feel good about those guys? And who do you feel the best about?
Probably the best about Waddle and St. Brown.
Mm-hmm.
Worst about Lamb. I think that what we collectively have fallen into in the fantasy community is we keep thinking of this Dallas offense as the Dallas offense when Dak hadn't had 2 major injuries, when it was really explosive, right?
Yeah.
And it just hasn't been the same in the past few years. I mean, they're good this year, they're winning, but they're doing it with defense and running the ball. And so I played way too much Lamb last week because he projected really well. I don't think I'm going to make the same mistake again, unless the mistake is that he gets 2 touchdowns, but that always can happen. I don't expect Metcalf to play. He didn't practice. Pete Carroll said, here's the quote, I'm going to leave it wide open. I can't call it as it in regards to whether or not he plays this week. And if Carroll won't say that he is playing, that probably means he's not, right? Because
Yeah.
he's always so optimistic. So I'm just assuming he's out, which you would think make Tyler Lockett look good,
Yeah.
but last week he didn't do so hot after Metcalf left. And I'm also tired of playing Tyler Lockett when he's 20% owned. Really tired of it, but might have to.
Thankfully, they raised his price to a point where it's not like where you have to play him in cash. If DK Metcalf is out, it might approach that situation again because he's just going to project crazy well. I will say I don't know if this is showing up on the injury report, but there were some beat writers that were talking about Tyler Lockett also dealing with like a hamstring injury. Again, not sure if that's on the injury report, so kind of take that with a grain of salt. Marquise Goodwin is the guy that kind of took over the routes for DK Metcalf. I don't even know his price, but he would be the.
It's
Go
cheap,
ahead.
30 something, I think. I think it's 30 something hundred.
Let me. Oh, I
Um,
just put. I have him up right here, John. He's 4,400, which is not.
oh, 44.
He's
Okay.
a little
Yeah,
bit
that's not.
more pricey than we probably would want. But of course, if DK Metcalf's out, he's going to project well. I will just mention too, Amon-Ra St. Brown left early last week's game with the concussion. I was reading up on that. It said that he didn't actually suffer a concussion. It was a result of kind
Right.
of the new Tua concussion rules is why he was held out. So he's expected to fully practice this week and shouldn't have any limitations. So I think it's a full go on Amon-Ra St. Brown. Some other guys I wanted to mention here, Johnny, a little bit on the cheaper end. Chris Olave. Brandon Cooks, and then who was the other one I wrote down? And DJ Moore. Three guys that I think are fairly priced, that we can feel decently about. DJ Moore, actually, is he a little bit cheaper than he was last week? Oh no, he got bumped $400. 10 targets in his first game with PJ Walker for 69
Uh,
yards and a touchdown. I don't know if this is stagnant. It was against a good Tampa Bay defense, and this Atlanta defense that they're now facing has been a pass funnel all year. So I kind of really like the spot for DJ Moore. Go ahead, Johnny, before I start blushing too much.
I hate that I like it. Well, I say I like it. I say projections like it, right?
Yeah.
It makes sense. They lost Robbie Anderson,
Hmm.
no McCaffrey, pass funnel defense, 10 targets, finally found the end zone. It's just something feels wrong about me running a crunch and getting 50% of them. Like, it's,
And he's gonna come with ownership too to make it even more
mhm,
gross. But on paper, it looks
yeah.
good. On paper, it looks good.
Yeah, it absolutely does. I mean, there's no reason it shouldn't. It's just the monkey in my brain doesn't like it because
Yeah.
he's let me down before. Similar for Cooks. He's not the consistent 10 target guy he was last year for reasons unknown to me. Maybe because I don't watch Texans games. Um, but he always looks pretty good in that mid range. Olave looks a lot better to me. I assume Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry are going to be out again.
Let me look that up
He's
really quick.
getting, yeah, I don't think either of them practiced. As a Michael Thomas season long manager, I'm assuming I can put him in an IR spot by Friday. Um, and Olave is going to get 10 plus targets again. So
Yeah.
I prefer Olave out of all those, even though DJ Moore probably looks the best on paper.
Yeah, and I think if Olave and DJ Moore were the same price, I would strongly prefer, Olave. But there is a $700 difference that may go a long way. I haven't built it all this week, so I don't really know. And you're right, Johnny. Neither Michael Thomas or Jarvis Landry practice today. Again, it's Wednesday, so just kind of keep an eye on that. But if they are out again, it would make Chris Olave a fantastic play in my opinion. Anyone else, Johnny? I got some gross guys if you want to hear them, but actually, I should mention Rondell Moore with DeAndre Hopkins back, and then Robbie Anderson. I expect to play more. I think Rondell Moore is going to be close to 100% of the snap, or I'm sorry, he's going to play 100% of his snaps in the slot, or close to 100%. I think they'll still move, Hopkins in there. Hopkins was playing in there a lot last week, but I think he's worth mentioning. It's probably a low floor cash game type of play. I don't know that you'd want to do it in tournaments. And then a couple other really gross ones for you: Drake London and Michael Gallup. I did want to bring up Renfro. I think Renfro's kind of always a solid play in PPR. I think he looked decent last week. Only got 3 targets. They were playing from ahead for most of the game. So if this game's more competitive, I'd feel a little bit better about him. Did you throw up in your mouth a little bit, Johnny, when I said that, or do you have any affinity for those guys?
No, I threw up in my mouth about Rondell Moore. I'm tired of this dude being 45 to 5,100, projecting for 13 points, and getting that or fewer every single week. Um, Greg Dortch played amazing to start the season. Rondell Moore comes back and is worse, but suddenly gets all the snaps. I don't get it. But I also don't like Cliff Kingsbury, and that's why I'm not coaching an NFL team. Um, so, like you said, low floor play. I would much rather play Hopkins, Ertz, maybe take a shot on Robbie Anderson. Probably not the corpse of AJ Green. I bet he'll be on the bench or in a coffin for the game. Drake London projects well yet again. Will the Falcons throw more than 13 times when they're losing by double digits this week? Probably not.
Why start now?
Yeah, I know. Can't try and catch up once you're behind. Only run. Um, Renfro is just since Adams has been there, I just don't see the same ceiling as last season. He looks similar to Rondell Moore, except I don't have any irrational dislike of him. I'm more interested in guys like Wan'Dale Robinson, like we mentioned earlier,
Mm-hmm.
um, Pickens or Claypool. If you have a lot of hurts, then they make sense on the way back. Pickett is a little bit more of a throw it up and let one of them go get it guy, and that's what those two receivers do. So I like them. If we could pick which of Paris Campbell and Alec Pierce is going to get the targets from Ellinger, that would be nice.
Good
I have a
luck.
feeling I would pick incorrectly. Yep, Paris Campbell waited 3 years to start being relevant.
Yeah.
Um, but and then Darius Slayton seems to be on an every other week schedule. This is an other week, so maybe something there. But we mentioned Goodwin at 4,400. I'm concerned that he's going to come in above whatever his ownership projection is because people will see DK out and see what he did last week. And I don't think that 2 touchdowns on 4 receptions is necessarily repeatable.
Yeah, for sure. And then the last guy that I'll mention here is this is like such a thin play, so excuse me, but Garrett Wilson. If Corey Davis is banged up and Brees Hall, his absence will leave some target share up for grabs. So I think Garrett Wilson at 4,200, could be in line for a decent target share. He does have a 14 target game and a 10 target game. Those are both with Joe Flacco, who would obviously be better for fantasy purposes for Garrett Wilson, but at 4,200 on kind of a gross week. Otherwise, I think that you could probably do worse than Garrett Wilson. Let's move on. We're
But
running.
you call him a thin play. I call him a guy in my placeholder cash lineup at the moment.
Oh, there you go. Okay, yeah. Well,
I feel absolutely gross about it.
yeah.
I
No,
will say that this week, that mid range of DJ Moore, Drake London, and Garrett Wilson, on Wednesday, with that
yeah.
disclaimer,
Right.
look
Yeah.
really great in projections and let you get up to those expensive running backs. And it just feels disgusting.
For sure. I mean, I think if Corey Davis is out, you can feel a lot better about it. A lot better about it. But yeah, again, like we said, it's Wednesday, so take it all with a grain of salt. We're running a little long here, Johnny, which we normally do, so no surprise there. I know we both have some NBA lineups rolling, so let's get through. Tight end and defense here pretty quickly. I'll just mention the guys that I think up top, kind of like fringe. I shouldn't say fringe, but like cash game plays. I think Higbee is going to be popular. Fryermuth is going to be popular, and then maybe Goddard. He's a little bit more expensive, but those feel like the top end guys. And then I don't think Kittle will be popular just due to pricing, but coming off a ceiling game, seems like they want to get him more involved. 10 targets a week ago, 9 targets this past game. So clearly more involved in the offense than he was when he first came back. And then Debo also has a hamstring injury, so he could be less involved. Those top guys, Johnny, who's your placeholder for cash right now, or do you have a cheapie?
It is a cheapie. It is Noah Fant at the
Yeah,
moment.
yeah. I was gonna mention him, yeah, for sure in play.
Yeah, especially if Metcalf is out, although they'll probably
Mm,
just throw to Will Disley instead. But of the cheapies, he absolutely looks the best. I went looking for Greg Dulcich this morning and then realized they're not on the main slate.
yeah,
The one bright spot in the Broncos offense right now.
right.
Um, but yeah, the guys you mentioned look good. Higbee got 2 targets before the bye. Surely that doesn't happen again, right?
I think that was
Right.
injury related. To be honest, yeah, right, yeah,
Yeah, I do too,
yeah,
but I think he's been a little bit limited too, so I'm a little bit nervous. But
yeah,
Goddard looks good. Fryermuth, I think Gesicki will be popular, assuming he's not on the Packers by Sunday.
right.
He's got that 2 touchdown gritty game, and he's in what will probably be the most stacked game of the week, um, in Miami, Detroit. So those are all guys I'm looking at.
Yeah, and I just looked up the Rams injury report. Tyler Higbee's not listed today, so that would make me feel a little bit better about him. I think he's definitely like a cash game play. You could probably use him in tournaments. I just usually prefer to get off the chalk at tight end, but really solid play. He's going to project well, even though it is kind of a tougher matchup. But yeah, I think those guys are awesome. The only one other guy, maybe there was a couple others I wanted to mention. Okay, yeah. Uh, if Darren Waller is out again, Foster Moreau. I know it wasn't a great game last week, but he played on 54 out of 56 possible offensive snaps. Got 5 targets. He's 3,100. I mean, as far as like cheapies go, I think him and Fant are in a similar boat. If Metcalf is out, I would feel better about Fant, but I think that those guys are similar. And then who was it? The other guy I just briefly would mention is TJ Hawkinson. I know Swift and Amon Ra are most likely going to play. I just do like the matchup. If there's a way you want to get different and still play into this game, I think that TJ Hawkinson is interesting for tournaments. And then last guy I'll mention is Jawan Johnson coming off a 2 touchdown game. Feels a little bit chasey, but if he's not going to get ownership, I'm totally fine playing into him. That's obviously,
Especially if Troutman's out again.
yes,
I'm not sure what his status is, but if he's out, then yeah, definitely he can play.
100%. Yeah, and I was gonna. That's a great point because I think that Juwan saw more snaps last week because of that, and I don't think he's gonna hit 20 points again. I don't think he's gonna score 2 touchdowns, but when we're talking about these cheap tight ends, you're really just hoping for 4 or 5 catches and hopefully they could sneak into the touchdown. So, anyone else in the tight end position you want to mention?
No, I kind of hope that people are off Higby after that bad performance and then the bye. He's yet to score a touchdown and has been very consistent despite that. So he's, a touchdown away from a really good game.
Yep.
But I really, with tight end, I usually just wind up with whoever the quarterback is. I usually wind up stacking him there.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to correlate my tight end too with the stacks for sure. So let's move on to defense. We can do this really quick, Johnny. I don't think we need to spend too much time on defense. The ones that popped out to me, kind of the cheat on the cheaper end that I think will be the popular cash game builds are Washington against that Sam Ellinger that we talked about earlier. I think that both the Rams and the Niners defense are going to be in play. They're playing each other, and then the Pats and the Jets. I think that as of right now, it looks like the Jets not showing up with that much ownership, but the other four that I listed look like they're going to come with some ownership. Might be the cash game plays. Is that what you're seeing, Johnny? Again, it's early in the week, so yeah. But what are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. Feels weird that the Commanders are going to probably be the cash game play as well as the quarterback they're
Yeah,
facing. Um, but it makes sense because they're both so cheap,
yeah,
at least for cash. I assume the Jets will come in higher than projection.
yeah,
Again, sort of similar to that Goodwin thing, just because they've been so good and like noticeably good. Um, and Pats, 49ers, and Rams look fine. If you want to go up to 4K for the Cowboys, they are projecting as pretty owned for some reason. I don't necessarily see that, but that's it's a lot for defense. And generally, the common knowledge is fade the chalk defense in tournaments, except for the past 2 or 3 weeks when the chalk defense has been hitting, which is pretty frustrating. But what I like to do is look for some of those high total games that people are going to stack, and then play a defense from that. So maybe a Miami or even a Detroit, although I don't know if I could do Detroit, but something like that, just as a way to get different and sacrificing what, a point or two of projection.
yeah. Well, and it may seem counterintuitive to play a defense from a high total game, but really a high total game brings a lot more passing opportunities, which brings a lot more sack opportunities or turnover opportunities for the defense. So I know, like, you might be thinking, why would I play a defense from a high total game? But I think Johnny makes a great point. It just leads to more turnovers and stuff, and kind of to that degree, I think that Seattle players will be popular. I think Giants defense is really interesting at 2,800, kind of a cheaper defense that I don't think anyone's going to go there. Seattle defense, or I'm sorry, Seattle offense, maybe been playing above their head a little bit, and if DK Metcalf is out and Giants are able to stop the run, I think Seattle could be forced into a lot of throws. So, any tournament options, Johnny, that you're kind of looking at before we get out of here?
Honestly, I haven't looked at it that much. Other
Yeah,
than that, I'll trying to spread it out pretty flat, and play less of the chalk. And as you mentioned, just to drive the point home, playing defenses in a high total game. Look at what Thursday night. Last Thursday, Cardinals defense was in the optimal
yeah,
showdown lineup, and so is Andy Dalton. That's a bit of an extreme case because you don't usually get two pick sixes in a row, but it certainly can happen, and you're going to get a huge ownership discount when everyone's playing, the skill position players from a game, and you've got the defense.
Yeah, and to the point of fading chalk defenses, I know we're talking classic slates here, but if you faded the incredibly popular Patriots defense on the showdown slate that just happened between the Bears and the Patriots, like that immediately shot you up above like 60% of the tournament. You know what I mean? So I just think fading chalk defenses in tournaments is always a easy way to get different and B plus EV at the same time. So
Mhm.
perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Johnny. Do you want to say anything else before we get out of here?
No, I think I'm good. Let's see how it goes this week. I've got another 150 cent lineups ready to rock and roll and see what happens.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, good luck. I do have our Discord up here. I'll drop a link below the video here. You should join us. We'll be talking about the Week 8 slate kind of leading up to it, and we'll have a lot of action for the Thursday night football game tomorrow night, too. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next week.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah, there we go. Like and subscribe. Thank you.